Welcome to Trust Your Inner Sense with Joanne Starkman podcast. I'm Joanne Starkman, and I look forward to going on this collaborative journey with you to ignite inspiration, inspire self-discovery, and instill new meaning in life. I'm excited to host a wonderful array of guests, including innovators, creatives, expert coaches, teachers, and much, much more who come together to share their stories. Each episode reveals how they've embraced their inner sense to pursue their passions and shine their unique lights in the world. We'll have thought-provoking discussions and chat about tools that will provide fresh perspectives to help you create a joyful and meaningful life. As founder and chief visionary officer of award-winning hair care brand Inner Sense Organic Beauty, I am also an avid meditator, platform artist, author, and mother of a special needs young adult. Over 20 years ago, I intentionally brought mindfulness to morning routines by authoring each affirmation on Inner Sense Organic Beauty's products, which we call Innerflections. You can check them out on the back of the bottle. It's my goal to have this podcast to be your warm and compassionate companion, whether you're on a journey for deeper meaning, seeking greater joy, or in need of love and healing. Let's continue our journey of self-discovery, self-care, and self-love. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive into this week's Trust Your Inner Sense episode now. Welcome, friends, to Trust Your Inner Sense podcast, where we explore the intersection of clean beauty, conscious living, and deeper truths that guide us. I'm your host, Joanne Starkman. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Svanika Balasubramanian, who is the co-founder and CEO of Repurpose Global, a groundbreaking organization tackling plastic pollution while centering human dignity and environmental justice. She's a bold voice redefining what sustainability and leadership look like, especially in a world that demands more than just surface level solutions. Let's dive into this powerful conversation about purpose, plastic, and the courage to lead with heart. Svanika, I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. Joanne, it's such a pleasure. I'm a huge fan of your work, the podcast, as well as the products. It's the only thing that holds my curls together, actually, which I've straightened it
Oh,
today. You can't see it, but
oh.
I'm a huge fan. The work that we've done together gives me so much joy, so much pride, and I'm so very happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same way. I love our connection and our work together is very powerful, and I appreciate everything that you do. So, you started Repurpose at such a young age. What internal wisdom or belief propelled you to step into this space?
I think it's an interesting question. I don't know if it was internal wisdom per se.
Divine guidance, maybe.
Yeah, the wisdom is yet to come. But it was a fascinating journey. So as you can tell by my very complicated name, I was born in India. I'm ethnically Indian, and I grew up in the Middle East in this tiny little country, Oman, and that's where I
Mm,
spent most of my childhood. I went to an international school that was co-run by the American and British embassies, and then I went to Penn and Wharton Business School for my undergraduate studies. And so I had, I think, in many ways, a very interesting, diverse 18 years going into college. And I was very excited about, what innovation meant and what the world held for me. I was so excited to get going. And Penn was this fascinating experience where everyone who enters Penn or Wharton really mostly ends up in investment banking or consulting.
I can
And then
imagine.
there are, yeah, some set pathways that you get into. But very serendipitously, my senior year, I met my now co-founder, Peter, as a co-author on a thesis project that we were working
Mm.
on. And it was one of those really, I think, maybe divine intervention, right? I think maybe one of those very lucky moments that completely changed the trajectory of my life, because the topic that we chose to write about was informal waste management. It was something that
Mm,
I absolutely knew nothing about, and it was not something that I had ever witnessed firsthand. But we started working on it, and we would get these little tiny grants, $1,000 here, $1,000 there, and we would take anything that we could get our hands on to fly to South America or Africa, Asia, and really chart out all of these patterns of systemic exploitation that was rooted in the products that we were using. This idea
mm.
that, I could use a product. I mean, it's 2:20 p.m. over here, and by now I've probably used 100 different products, right, in our day-to-day
Of
lives.
course.
And all of this ends up out of sight, out of mind for us, but really not out of trouble. It ends up in all of these different places around the world, wreaking havoc on both environmental systems. But I think what was more devastating for me to learn about was really the social impact of
Mm.
the waste that we were creating. And so we spent a year going from landfill to landfill, from dump site to dump site, really trying to understand what was going on. What was this multi-billion-dollar unregulated trade that was happening? And at the end of that one year, it was interesting. I had this 200-page paper that nobody would read. I don't even think my mom has read my thesis, but it just felt wrong to leave it there. It just felt wrong
Mm.
to say, well, we've kind of, peered behind the curtain and we've seen into this space. And now I'm just going to go back and then go back to my day job, or graduate and then go back. And so I still remember this conversation. My two co-founders and I, at graduation, we looked at each other and we said, we owe each other 1 year of our lives. We promise each other this 1 year to move to India, to move to, one of these different sites, and just see if there's anything at all, any value at all that we can add over here. And at the end of that year, if we fail and if we find that really the problem is too massive and we don't have a role to play, well and good, but at least let's try. And so we packed our bags, and none of us had ever lived in Mumbai before, but we just sort of it was really not internal wisdom, but really this bravado, this, I think, this false bravado,
Cockiness?
this
No.
cockiness, honestly, that like we were going to come in and change the world. I really, truly believe that. And we moved across the world. And I mean, you're right, it was a little bit of cockiness because we would get these threats from the local mafia. Like, even today, so much of waste management and the unregulated sector is tied to organized crime. And we would have people turn up at our house. We would have people, call us. And back then
Wow.
I was 21 years old, and I was like, well, who are you to, tell me to
You're like,
not
this
work
is
in
kind of
this
exciting.
space? Yeah. But I was like, this means we're doing something,
Right?
like this means it's actually working. But anyway, that's kind of how we stumbled into the space. And my goal really coming into it was the circular economy needs capital, right? Like, I think there was
Mm.
this deep understanding that it didn't matter if we came up with the best technologies. It didn't matter if we had the best human rights intent in mind. Nothing was going to change if we didn't increase the amount of funding going into setting up these formal regulated systems for the long term, not just like one-off beach cleanups, but really things that I think those have their place too, but really things that could systemically change the conversation for decades to come. And yeah, I think that's really how many years later I find myself here.
Yeah, that's incredible. What an incredible story. Thank you so much for telling us that. I could totally see that young person that just has done their thesis and like, I'm going to get this, That's cool. That's good for you. How fun. I kind of want to go into an area of redefining responsibility and, the idea of the future of sustainability, specifically in business. And you often speak about radical responsibility in the context of business and the environment. What does that look like in action for the founder of a brand today?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, right? I have so many of these conversations, and I think it's particularly timely. We're filming this in the summer of 2025, and given everything that is happening around us, it's a very timely question. I have two answers. One is maybe macro, just about
Mm-hmm.
how I see the economy as a whole, and then maybe one more specifically to your question of what is a founder of a brand, how does that apply to them? So, my macro thesis in all of this is that as long as we think about our responsibility as something, our ESG responsibilities, or DEI, whatever, like things that are good for the world,
Mm-hmm.
as something that sits separate from our bottom line, something that is not for profit, quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
that sits separate from our profit line, it's never going to get the attention it deserves. It's never
Mm-hmm.
going to get the scale that it deserves because these words have power. And then when we say something is not for profit, immediately, most brands or most companies are going to think, well, I don't want that cost item, like I don't want,
Mm-hmm.
why should I do it? And that's why when we look at the pace of innovation, the pace of development and impact, it's so much slower than anything else, right? We're thinking about AI and technology. Think about how fast NVIDIA has grown or OpenAI has grown. Just the rapidness of how quickly that ecosystem has changed versus if you think about literacy, if you think about menstrual hygiene, if you think about waste management, you think about trash and plastic, all of these we're having the same conversations today that we were having 20 years ago, same solutions that we're trying to get funding for that we were
Mm-hmm.
trying to get funding for 20 or 30 years ago. And I think that's just really the wrong way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we really want to move forward with urgency, there does need to be that intersection of purpose and profit. And
Mm-hmm.
we really need to reshape our economy to internalize these externalities as part of our bottom line and integrate it into what we call conscious capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's my a bigger macro philosophical take there. But now how that applies to an individual brand, I think really comes down to the identity that the brand wants to forge. But I firmly believe that consumers are smart, like
Mm-hmm.
especially the consumers, like the Gen Zs, the new generation that is coming in, and they want to vote with their dollars. They want to commit to brands whose values resonate with them. And so I do feel like history is watching, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
if you're a brand that takes a stand in this moment in time and says, I'm not going to be wishy-washy, I do
Mm-hmm.
believe in this, I think consumers will reward that. And they will notice that regardless of who the current administration is, regardless of, which way the politics are swaying, this brand stood for something.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not something that was separate, alien to them, not something that they were doing differently from their day to day, but really was part of their day to day. They integrated things like equity into how they treat their employees and how they show up in events and how they show up in advertisements. It goes into every single part of their day to day. I think that gets rewarded. And I fully believe that these are the brands that will win out competitively. And so it's not just do it for the sake of doing it or because it's the right thing. I also do think it's the smartest business move you could be making,
Mm-hmm.
to live and breathe values
Mm-hmm.
that are authentic to you, that are good for the world as well.
Yeah, of course, I couldn't agree more. And it just kind of always makes me think about Greg and how much he just continues to strive in that regard. I mean, he's just so just innately intelligent that we're leading from a place of passion and authenticity and real true meaning when it comes to the things that we do, because we're very, very passionate about it. So I appreciate you sharing that. What do you feel like is the most common misconception that people have about plastic neutrality or sustainability efforts? And specifically, of course, because I'm in the beauty industry, I think that's a interesting area for my listeners. But what would you say is the most common misconception?
Yeah, I think there is a general sense of distrust, right? I think there's a general
Mm,
sense that where is the money going? Is it performative? I think like people,
yes.
because there's so many brands coming out, and especially right now, right? I think we had this study that came out recently that showed that over 50% of sustainability commitments that have been made in the last 5, 6 years have been silently rolled back. And so it's
Mm,
easy for, people to come out and say in 2030, in 2050, by then I would have achieved XYZ thing.
hmm.
And it's meaningless today. And you can always silently erase it off your website
Right.
1 year before it comes to life, right? And so I think there is this general unease amongst consumers, including myself, like I'm a
Hmm.
consumer too, and I see I'm always very hyper aware of the actions that brands are taking, that
Hmm.
is this really something like true, something authentic, or
Right.
is it just performative?
Hmm.
And so people want to see the results, people want to see action, people want to see the proof behind it. And so my goal with everything that we do at Repurpose is that there is that complete transparency, that one-to-one tracking. We spent a lot of time and energy and resources building out our traceability platform, where now you can think about, we have operations, we do plastic recovery in about 40 different locations around the world in these ocean hotspots and coastline areas. And every single kilogram of plastic that we collect, we know exactly who collected it, where it went, what happened to it. There's that complete traceability that is provided. And the reason we put so much thought into that was to, be able to give brands that confidence to tell consumers this is something real. And we're not talking about the future. We're talking about action that has already happened. So we're not standing and promising something vague. We're celebrating something real that has already happened, that has been accomplished. And I think that is the movement that I would love to see across all impact areas, really. Just this focus on impact ROI, right? I mean, we think so
Hmm.
much about ROI as brand owners, as business owners, on every investment we make. I would love that same sort of rigor to be applied to all impact areas as well.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, that's really amazing. Thank you for that. Well, so if you could wave a magic wand and change one regulation or practice in corporate sustainability overnight, what would it be and why?
Ooh, interesting. I think, wow. Ooh, I have so many. Can I have several magic wands? I don't know.
Okay, maybe a genie
Uh,
with three wishes.
she was just no, I won't do a cop out. I'll do a real one. I'll do a real one. I think for me it goes back to this whole idea of how do you internalize the cost of these externalities that your business has on the world
Mm,
around you.
mhm.
And I think you can only do that if there is a price put against it. And this is the same, rubric that we had when we started Repurpose, because we put a price on every kilogram of plastic that was being recovered. And that was important because otherwise it just sort of like sits in this ether of like, you need to hire some people, you need some like, what are you doing? It's
Right.
just sort of like, I had $100,000, I have no idea where it went, right? It's sort of like
Mhm.
poof. And I
Mhm.
think the same thing when it comes to corporate stewardship. Like if I could get, when we do our tax returns, or when we do any of these, like, accounting practices, if we can get line items that put a price on the externalities of the business, whether that is our waste footprint, whether that is our climate footprint, whether that is our water footprint, we take from this earth every time we produce. And I
Mm.
think being able to put a number against that not only brings it very front and center and makes it part of the day-to-day business conversation,
Mhm.
and integrates it into your balance sheet. I think it also incentivizes brands to then do the right thing, right? When you see the dollar figure, you
Absolutely.
are much more incentivized to want to take further action, to do things against it as well. And I do think technology has evolved enough to get us to a place where you can put those numbers. Now, of course, we can't boil the ocean and have exact figures, but I don't think this is so far out that,
Mhm.
like I have no idea. I do think we have the tech available to put numbers against a lot of these figures.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I kind of want to jump to the human side of things. There's so many pieces of it, right? Repurpose Global centers on livelihoods of informal waste workers. What inspired you to focus on this often overlooked human aspect of the environment?
Yeah, I mean, we actually got into it through that, right? I think that was like our entry into the environmental aspect. And it
Mm-hmm.
came because we were so viscerally seeing that, in the early days of Repurpose, I literally would spend all of my days following like a waste picker around, like in like a rag. There's these different layers of middlemen that exist as well. And I would follow one person around and then see who they sold to, and then I'd go follow them the next day. And I was like this,
Mm,
person lurking in the background. But what that charting out that network taught me was this is our waste is actually out of sight for us because there's quite literally over 20 million people out there who are handling it for us, who are not part of the formal economy. And
mm,
it is a cyclical, generational poverty that has been exacerbated by us not paying enough attention to it. So I remember in these early days how you would go into a landfill and you would find, and you still do, right? Like kids who are 5, 6 years old,
mm,
and then these kids are addicted to drugs and alcohol
mm,
at that age
mm,
because their parents are addicted, and it's the only way that anyone can spend an entire day inside a garbage dump sifting through all of the, piece of trash in there, the waste in there, the rotting garbage in there, to pick apart what is recyclable and what isn't recyclable, and then spend 12, 13 hours a day there. And
mm,
so, and this happens, it's generational, like that there is no incentive for that cycle to be broken. And so it was really important when we set up the systems for repurpose that we were approaching this as an intersectional issue,
mm,
because no issue is ever one thing. I think that's
mm,
also a mistake that we often make. But there is nothing that is just environmental. There is nothing that is a plastic issue is a climate issue. A
mm-hmm.
climate issue is a waste issue, and all of it's a women's issue. I mean, for
Of
example, over
course.
90% of like the people who are paid the lowest, even in that informal setup, are women and children. And so you have elements of gender that go into that as well. It's a caste issue because in countries like India, people who are of the lowest caste are the ones
Mm,
who most often are doing this job, and are seen as being quote unquote dirty by birth because they are meant to
mm,
work in landfills. And so I think it was important for us to view this across all the dimensions it was presenting itself in, and then find a solution that worked across that, because otherwise there was, it was not true environmental justice. It was gonna never be the right solution.
right. Yeah, that's kind of unimaginable. I appreciate you sharing that. Can you go a little bit deeper and maybe share a story of one individual or a community whose life has been transformed through your work?
I can talk about this for hours. Yes. I love talking about the solution side of things because oftentimes I'm just kind of like the boogeyman that comes and scares people about like how terrible the world is. And my hope is that, it's always good to see that that can be changed, that that doesn't have to be the way it is. So yes, let me see. I think one of my a recent story that I just experienced actually, and this was it deeply resonated with me because it was not something that we even planned for, but it was one of those like ripple effect sort of things that happened.
Mm,
So we started one of our projects, Project Harakal, in southern India, about 4 years ago. And this is basically bringing what we would call curbside recycling here in the United States, to coastal villages that don't have any waste management at this point in time. And we had been scaling that. And as part of that, we had this commitment to primarily employ women who were entering the formal workforce for the first time. So we were taking women who were previously in these informal roles and then giving them all the benefits of formal employment. employment. And one condition, quote unquote condition, that we had for that was that we wouldn't be paying out the salary in cash. We would do it only through a bank account, like it would go directly to their
Mm.
bank account.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that we did because it forced, formalization, in the sense that a lot of the women never had even gotten a birth certificate, or they'd never had
Mm.
like any sort of state identification. And because of that, they were not able to access any of the benefits from the government that were coming into them as well. So we did that. And then recently I heard this story about how these women now for 4 years, they've been getting money, salary into their bank accounts. And that's actually become a format of a credit score for them. And
Wow.
so they were finally able to access bank loans and, get a mortgage out to start building a house. And this was unimaginable before because they were very mistrusting of banks, and they would never have that financial inclusion. And they had never imagined that upward mobility was something that was available to them. And the majority of these women that we're talking about are also single income earners. Like, they have
Mm-hmm.
husbands who often struggle with addiction or,
Mm.
other things. And so the pride in these women and being able to say, as a woman, as a mother, I'm able to build a house for my children and build a house for my family, maybe for the first time in many, many generations.
Wow.
I think that was really incredible for me to, just hear those stories and then talk to them about how their lives had been transformed in just those 4 years of working at the project.
Mm, that makes my heart feel so full. I can only imagine what it must feel like for you changing lives like that. That's really, really, really incredible. Well,
That's you as well. That's Inner Sense too. I think all of that, the whole network works because of the brands that we work with.
yeah.
Just as Repurpose, nothing would be possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. That's pretty incredible. Well, I kind of want to turn to you a little bit personally now. Like, just curious, what daily practices and rituals help you stay grounded and connected to your purpose as a leader?
Yeah, honestly, I would love to hear everybody's because I
I
think
know
you can,
it's
yeah.
a toolbox sometimes,
It's a
right? Yeah.
toolbox, exactly. And I think the same tools don't always work. I
It's
think
so
it
true.
depends. I have maybe I'll give a couple
Yeah.
that tend to work for me. So someone once told me that if you're feeling burnt out, sometimes you can just rest and then expect to go back and then do the work. You need to regenerate. You need to replenish as well. And
Mm-hmm.
and so I think of my toolbox as combinations of replenishment and rest, and then,
Mm-hmm.
like which ones I need more when. But one of the things that helps in the replenishment side is it's often, and I hear this all the time from, brands I speak with, from people who are very passionate about the state of the world and really making a difference, that is it all too daunting? Is it all too
Mm-hmm.
much? There's
Mm-hmm.
always, there's so many problems, there's
Mm-hmm.
just so many things going wrong. And why even try, right? Like, what am I even doing? And that's when sort of one of the things that helps me, it comes from my granddad, actually. So my grandparents were freedom fighters. They fought in the Indian independence movement, and then they did a lot of activist work themselves. Their day job was teachers, like they were public school teachers.
So were
But
my parents. They
oh, no
weren't such
way.
activists, but I love hearing that this is in your lineage. That's incredible. Yeah. But my parents were both school teachers, so I can relate to that. Yeah.
And I think there's so much empathy that comes from that, right? When
Absolutely.
you're seeing so many different kids every day and so many different forms of how life is going and whatnot. And I would ask him the same thing, how do you stay motivated when there's so many issues going on? And
Mm.
one of the things that he would tell me is that it's actually a misnomer to think that we are unique. I think the
Mm.
centricity of our lives right now, now, like, we are all absorbed in our own, oh my God, all of these things are burning. But the reality is that in every generation, something has been on fire. If we could
Mm-hmm.
chart like human legacy back thousands of years, and there's always been something going wrong with the world, some form of war, some form of like conflict, some form of like environmental turmoil. The world
Mm-hmm.
is always on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And as a species, we're always on fire and we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
put out those fires.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would say, your responsibility is not to make sure that there is no fire ever. Your responsibility is just to say, I'm going to pick this one fire to put out, and I will not give this over to my children. And all we can do is hope that our children have different fires to fight. And all we can do is that we've solved what we can solve for, but now they have a different set of things to go fight. And that, I feel like is helpful to think through.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's just bringing me to tears thinking about that, just like the lineage piece, and what a beautiful like piece of advice. It may also makes me think of like that's kind of the opposite of like handing the torch over. Like you don't want to hand the same fire over. You want to go figure out different fires. So I love that. That's beautiful. I mean, what a beautiful reflection on your family and the lineage piece for you and what you're doing. I mean, what a wonderful way to, bring your family forward in the world. So thank you so much for sharing that really beautiful thing. I appreciate that. Oh, wow. I don't even really know where to go with that. I'm just, okay. So I really want to, one more thing, and maybe you've kind of already answered this. So apologize if this question's redundant, but like in moments of doubt, how do you reconnect with your inner sense? And why is that important for you?
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I think, as a woman, you're always going to, statistically, we doubt ourselves more. But,
Hmm.
as change makers, we doubt ourselves more. And I was speaking with someone recently, maybe you know him, Noor from Aora, Mexico. It's a makeup brand. They're completely plastic free, and they've just launched a few months ago.
I
And
don't, but
he
it sounds
was
like somebody I should know. I'll
Yes, he's
look that
actually
up.
brilliant. Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And he was talking about how there is something intrinsically lonely about disruption. Because if you're doing
Mm,
something that is disruptive, that by default means nobody else is doing it,
mm,
which by default is going to mean you're going to feel lonely and maybe like isolated on that journey. And then, wondering, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? But like, really, there's no path to follow at all.
no.
Um, I think, that there's all of these flavors of doubt, like that I feel constantly as well. I don't know if I've actually solved for it, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. But I think what really helps me is looking back at how far we've come and in the community that we've been able to bring together. I think the repurpose community, this idea that there are quite literally like over 500 brands and then these incredible founders and these incredible people who have come together, thousands of workers that we brought together, this one community. By all rational means, it shouldn't exist, right? It makes no
Hmm.
sense, for all of these different parts of the world to be intersecting. Someone who sits in San Francisco to be like working with someone in Indonesia, or it just, I think the idea that so many people believe change is possible, so many people are waking up every single day and actively choosing to be part of this change, this movement. I get so much energy from that, because if you have, confidence in me, I think that gives a lot more confidence in myself, for me.
Absolutely. I love that
Yeah.
you brought up the community piece because that's always one of the things that I mention. Like I just makes me think when I interview candidates that, to come work for InnerSense, sometimes they ask me like, what is my favorite part of the business? Or like, what do I love most about InnerSense? And I always reflect back on community and just the idea of like how global it is and how far the reach is, and the connection with such a variety of people that come from so many walks of life, and just to be able to learn from other people. I think it touches in that whole teacher thing that my parents, brought
Yeah.
down for me,
Yeah.
just to be able to connect and learn from one another is so, so powerful. Svanika, this has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible story and your insights. It's really, your work is so powerful. And a reminder that conscious leadership isn't just about intention, it's about bold action rooted in empathy and integrity. And I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciated being here.
Where can people find you? Where can my listeners reach out to you?
Yeah, our website is www.repurpose.global, and we also have an Instagram page that is Repurpose Global. We have started to be active on Instagram now, so
Oh, awesome.
there. And there's on the website different things that both brands and independent consumers, actions that they can take to be part of the movement.
Okay, incredible. Well, I would like to thank you again so much for being here, and thank you for all that wonderful information. And to my listeners out there, I invite you to definitely go check out Svanika's website. And I hope that you all feel more inspired to look more closely at the impact you create and how you can lead with a little more purpose and heart, no matter your path. And to my dear, dear listeners, until next time, please always trust your inner sense. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode, dear friends. I would be thrilled to hear which part resonated with you the most. Your reflections on today's topic and how it sparked action in your life mean a lot to me. Feel free to share your thoughts at podcasts@innersensebeauty.com or leave a review. I look forward to you coming back next week to explore another exciting topic together. If you'd like to dive deeper, be sure to check out the show notes for some valuable links. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself. Know that you are surrounded by love and always trust your inner sense. Wishing you all the best, friends.